This is section 7.4. We're going to be solving radical equations. The homework is 50 through 60. Whenever you solve equations, you have to talk about opposites. The opposite of multiplying is dividing. The opposite of add is subtract. Suppose I have an equation 2 times x equals 16. What are you going to do first? If I have 2 times x, the opposite of times is divide. Suppose I have x squared equals 25. Well, if I want to solve it, I have to get rid of the square, and the opposite of square is square root. So the opposite of squaring is square root. The opposite of square root is square. So let's suppose I have the square root of x equals 3, and I want to get rid of this square root symbol. No, I cannot just erase it, however tempting that is. In order to get rid of a square root, I have to square. Remember, what you do to one side, you have to do to the other. So this square remember, what you do to one side, you have to do the other. So this square right here is going to cancel out with this square root. And on the left, you're left with x. And on the right-hand side, remember that's 3 times 3. It's not 3 plus 3. 3 times 3 is 9. So example 1, suppose we have the square root of 3x equals 6. Suppose I want to solve it. The opposite of square root is square. Don't forget you have to square both sides. This square will cancel with this square root, and you're left with 3x on the left. 6 times 6 is 36. And from here, it's straightforward. Divide by 3, and x is equal to 12. The downside with solving a square root equation is you do have to actually check your answer. There are what we call extraneous solutions. That's when something looks like a solution, acts like a solution, but is not in fact a solution. So what we're going to do is we're going to plug in the 12 and see if we get a true statement. 3 times 12 is 36, and the square root of 36 is indeed 6. So 12 is fine as an answer. Example 2 I'm going to have you do on your own. Let's take a look at example 3. Notice I have a square root on the left-hand side. So to undo the square root, I'm going to square. So the square cancels with the square root, and I have 5x plus 5. 2 times 2 is 4. From here, it's a standard equation. I'm going to subtract 5 and divide by 5, and you get x equals negative 1/5. For this one, I have a square root on both sides. Same thing. You're just going to square both sides. The square and the square root cancel. On the left, I have 11x minus 6. And on the right, I have 6 minus 11x. That doesn't mean the answer is 0. You have to actually solve this one. I'm going to put the x's on the left, so let me add 11x to both sides. 22x minus 6 is equal to 6. Don't try and take a shortcut here. Add 6 to both sides. 22x is equal to 12. Divide by 22. and you get x equals, remember, I want this as a fraction. I want you to reduce the fraction. 2 goes into 12 6 times, and 2 goes into 22 11 times. Be careful with this one. Notice this negative 5, which is outside of the square root, but it is on the left-hand side. In order to solve a square root equation, you have to get the square root alone first. You have to. You will not be able to do this question without getting the 5 on the other side first. So add 5 to both sides. And now you can solve it like normal. You're going to square. 2x minus 1 is equal to 25. Add 1. 2x is 26, and divide by 2. Notice this one is cube root. You're going to do this in the same way. The opposite of cube root is cube. So you're going to cube both sides. Again, the cube cancels with the cube root. So on the left you have 4x. Now this is negative 3 to the third power. That means negative 3 times negative 3, which is 9, times negative 3, which is negative 27. And divide by 4. This one I'm going to have you try on your own. Here's a hint. You're going to cube both sides. Example 8, we got a word problem, but I gave you the formula right here. The only thing you have to do is make sure that you know what the E, the P, and the R represent. It's helpful to notice the units. So E is volts. E is volts. The maximum number of volts E that can be placed across a resistor is given by the formula, where P is the number of watts of power that the resistor can absorb, and R is the resistance of the resistor in ohms. So R is in ohms, P is in watts, and E is in volts. If a half-watt resistor can have at most 20 volts of electricity across it, find the number of ohms. So what we're trying to find is ohms, and ohms is the R. So we're trying to find the R. We know E, which is the volts. We have 30 volts. We know we have a half watt, and we're trying to find the ohms. So we're going to take these numbers and plug them into our formula. E is equal to the square root of P times R. E is equal to 30. P is equal to 1/2. And we don't know what R is. And we have to solve for R. Doesn't matter that this is an R, could be an X, doesn't matter. We're still solving for something inside a square root. So square both sides. 30 times 30 is 900. 1/2 R. Now remember, instead of dividing by 1/2, it's actually easier to multiply by the reciprocal. The reciprocal of 1/2 is 2/1, or 2. So if I multiply both sides by 2, I get 1800 is equal to R. So the 1/2 cancels with the 2. So the resistance is 1800 ohms. Another word problem, but again I give the formula. Be careful here. S is the half of the perimeter, so add up the sides and divide it by 2, and that's S. Find the area of the triangle if A is equal to 5, B is equal to 11, and C is equal to 14. So the first thing we have to do actually is find the perimeter, okay, because that's our S. So the perimeter, remember, is you add up the sides. You have 5 plus 11 plus 14. 5 plus 11 is 16, plus 14 gives me 30. But S is half of that. So if we take 15 and divide it in half, we get S is equal to 15, and this is not a 5, that's an S. And I know you can't tell the difference between my S's and 5s, I apologize. Try not to use S's. So let's go back to the area formula. Area is equal to the square root S times, trying to remember the formula, S minus A, S minus B, S minus C. And plug in your numbers. So square root, S is 15, so we have 15. 15 minus 5, we have 15 minus 11, and we have 15 minus 14. Remember, when you're simplifying this, you're going to start inside, and we have parentheses. We have grouping parentheses. So 15 subtract 5 is 10. 15 subtract 11 is 4. And 15 subtract 14 is 1. All right. Now we multiply. So we have 15 times 10. That will give us 150. 4 times 1 is 4. So I don't need to write the times 1. And square root 150 times 4 is 600. So the area is the square root of 600. In the interest of time, I'm not going to simplify that, but I would expect you to simplify square roots. If you remember how to simplify square roots? Where you do the factor tree, 2 times 300, 2 times 150, etc. And any pairs come out. Okay. All right. So that is all for section 7.4. If you have questions, be sure to ask in class.